I'd like to introduce Huy, who is going to show us some theory, some practice on actual practical examples of writing an extension. Probably has to say nothing about extensions because, as we all know, there's no difference between theory and practice, or at least in theory. The thing that I like about this is it solves one of the problems that Adam was talking about, which is when companies really don't know how to do UI design, you can go and you can fix their UI.
Which company is that?
It's a company that had a 13th birthday today, but yeah. Anyway, Huy.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm visiting from the U.S. I've been here for about a year, but fortunately I have to go soon, so this is perfect timing for me to say hi to the tech community in Sydney before I go. So when Google Plus came out a few months ago, I was very excited, just like everybody else. Has anybody who has checked out Google Plus? Pretty much everybody. Who uses Google Plus every day? Oh, quite a bit. Well, yeah, I've been glued to Google Plus nonstop, which is a little bit like the Orchid days in 2004. I was pretty much glued to that as well. But then I got banned, so I get a second chance at being on a Google network, and that's Google Plus. So when it came out, like a lot of developers, we were very antsy to find an API. But we didn't know when the API was going to come out, and Google Plus is very mum about it. So I started fiddling around with extensions because we don't have to wait for an API, and that's the beauty of it. And so far, as some of you may know, that the API came out a couple of weeks ago, or less than a couple of weeks ago. And in the meantime, I've been playing with extensions, and I just started using the API. So I've done a little bit of both API work and undocumented work. So the Google Plus API. So right now, there's not that much. The point of the release of the API is just a preview. It's for Google to get some feedback and on what people kind of want to do with the system. It's not really to be used for production or even useful things. But it turns out it actually can be pretty useful so far, as I found out. Right now, the API, there are two APIs. There's a general API and there's a Hangouts API. The general API is what you would expect for any web application out there where you're just querying data. Right now, you can only get the user's profile, their posts, and only the public posts, which they call activities. Well, the general term is activities because there's a number of different other things you can do besides posts. Or retrieve a single public activity. And then there's the Hangouts API, which is very unique to Google, as you know. And right now, it's a little more fleshed out. What's been released for the Hangouts API is a little bit more fleshed out than the general API because you can build a full collaborative application within Google Plus Hangout. But you can't do the reverse where you can't take the Google Plus Hangout and embed in your web application or inside of your site yet. Okay, that may come later. So right now, the portion of the APIs that are published, as I said, the functionality is very limited. It's read-only, just a few things. And there's a very low free usage quota. Right now, it's just maximum 1,000 requests per day. That's what's published, but from the work that I've done, I haven't seen any quota problems. And I'm pretty sure we went over 1,000 requests per day with my extension. I think they're just saying that so people don't get disappointed. But at this point, useful things can be done with the API. I may be wrong. Maybe somebody can tell me that maybe there's a bug in their system and they're going to fix it. Then there's a portion of the API that we can see that's being used, and that's with the Google Plus games. If you've ever seen the games, they're using the API. We don't have access to it because we're not trusted testers, and everybody go, boo. And so they have a little bit of an unfair advantage. Same thing Facebook did. That's out of Facebook's playbook. Hopefully, they'll release a little bit sooner so we can also dig in there. So if you wanted to get started with the Google Plus API, it's actually pretty quick, and you can actually get something up within an hour, right? So the first thing is you got to get an API key from the API console, and that's just a couple of clicks. You don't have to send any paperwork or anything like that. It's not like the Apple App Store or anything like that. Then you download the library for whatever your preferred language is. Interestingly, my preferred language was JavaScript, and there was no library. But turns out you don't really need much of that. For what I did, I didn't really need that. And then the documentation, I put a couple of links there where you can browse the documentation quickly and do some test requests. Okay, and so here's because I use JavaScript. I can show you right now that it's actually pretty simple. It's just I'd like to say it's one line, but really it's line because it's a bunch of lines all mushed together. It's one line. It's got one semicolon, but it's actually multiple lines. That's using a jQuery to just make a request to the API, and what you get back is JSON, right? And JSON is native to JavaScript, so it's quite easy to go through that and then just go through the data and get what you want. So now, if I were to run this, which I'm going to do right now, I get nothing. I get blank, and the reason that is, we'll find out by opening up the JavaScript console here. By the way, this presentation thing is live JavaScript. You'll get something about access control origin, right? So you have this presentation runs like a web app. It's actually running off the web. And so it's constrained by the same permission problems, same permission restrictions as any web application, any script that's running in a web application. It can only make XML HTTP requests to the same domain that it came from. So that won't work right here from this presentation, but it would work from a Chrome extension because, as Adam said, you can request additional permissions and by specifying the domain name of the server that you want to request from, it's one thing to remember is that Chrome extensions have a lot more capabilities than just a web app script because you have a lot more access. But there are other alternatives. One of them is JSON-P, and with that one, you don't even need additional restrictions, and that applies for Chrome extensions. So if I run it here, I get undefined. Why? Because I haven't actually put in my API key from the console. So let me go ahead and do that. I actually hid my API key in here. I'm going to go ahead and edit the code. Let me run it. All right, and then you get JSON back. Okay, so what this is a list of posts. It's the same thing you see in Google Plus in the center, but for a specific user. In this case, I'm the user, so that's the ID that I put in, and the title tells you exactly your public activity feed for Huy Zing, right? And this is JSON, and if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see like you have an entire post in there, right? I mean, this is pure text, and it's even got some HTML tags in there, so it displays with bold. So that's by the little bit of demo, and all I did was take that one massive line of code, and I put it inside of an extension. Let me go ahead and give you a demo. Here's Google Plus, and it's actually already running. I guess I should leave it as expanded first. So this is the normal Google Plus interface, and what I did here is imagine if you have somebody that's added you as a user. You don't mind if I go dig through your notifications? No, it's not. Okay. So somebody added you to Google Plus, and you're not sure who they are, whether they're interesting, whether you want to circle them back. So normally when you hover over a name, you get a hover card. Okay. But what I added at the bottom is this public post button that if you hover over, it will make a call to the API and get a listing of all the recent posts. Okay, so here you have essentially all the public posts for that user, and you can even expand it. And if you click on here, it will actually go to that post. Beyond that, there's a couple more tabs here. You have the top tab. I've taken all those posts and assigned a score based on an engagement. For example, number of comments, number of +1s, number of reshares, and sorted in decreasing order. And so you get a better view of like what interesting posts it may have. And using the same stats, I've come up with a number of points per post. And you also get an idea of how noisy they are publicly. And that gives you an idea of whether you actually want to add them to your stream. And finally, there's a tab here that I added where you take all the content of those posts and you create a word cloud out of it. I don't speak German, so this doesn't really tell me much. But I assume it's German, right? And and you can do this from any of the hover cards. So at first, when the API came out, I was very disappointed because I was like, man, I can't do anything with this. But actually, it turns out I can do something with this, and I can actually give this functionality to users. And actually, I released this, and users love it. It really depends on how you use Google+, but a lot of users do want to know what people are about before they add them to the circles. I just ignore most people that add me, so it's all good. Okay, but that's the Google+ API, but actually the past couple of months since Google+ came out, I've been having a lot more fun actually hacking Google+, meaning using the functionality that's not available as an official API. Okay, and to do that, you have to dig deep. Okay, you have to dig into the DOM, dig into the CSS. Okay, so what would you want to do that? I mean, it sounds like hell. And it actually is hell, but it's also fun, right? Google Plus came out with one clean look, and it looks nice and it looks clean. But it's right now it still is designed for a lowest common denominator. I mean, if you have a white screen, you're still going to get a very small UI. So a lot of people hated that, and they hacked it. I didn't do it because tons of people already did that. But you can customize the look however you want. You may want to get rid of the games icon. You may want to get rid of some of the columns on the right-hand side that nobody uses, right? And also, I find that a lot of things could be done quicker, which is what I did with the hover cards, for example. So you don't have to navigate to a user's profile. You can just look at their hover card. But there were other things as well. I mean. Here's what I did for post. I really wanted to do something that's a little bit more like Google Reader, and I wanted to keep track of what I've read. So you can collapse posts. This is not part of Google Plus, and you can collapse posts, and it will remember. So if you come back tomorrow, you'll know what you've already read. If you go to another circle, it will do the same thing. It will keep track of that. And if comments come in, it will show you right here. So even if you've already read a post, you can still kind of keep track of it and switch between posts and stay engaged in all the conversations that you're interested in. Okay. I personally prefer a different kind of mode, the list mode, which basically keeps only one post open at all times. And that's what you can do here. Where is my other thing? So another reason to play around with this, with the Google Plus DOM and CSS is that the Google Plus uses the latest web techniques. So you learn a lot. You learn a lot just by seeing what they do. Okay, and that's that includes HTML5, CSS3, and Ajax best practices, right? Now, why do I use? Adam asked the question, which browser do you guys use? Yeah, I prefer to use Google Chrome, and I prefer to develop for Google Chrome because it's a very fast browser, and it's constantly developed, and I think it's going to be number one. I mean, that's inevitable. And the developer tools are quite good. I don't think Firebug can keep up either. Initially I wanted to port it to Firefox, but at this point, I'd rather develop new features than spend time porting on a browser that I don't think is going to last very long. My opinion. So, like I said, hacking the DOM and the CSS is quite challenging. It takes a lot of time. Right now, the DOM is obviously not documented. But, now that we're getting started, maybe we can share some information, so that might change. Google Plus is changing quite rapidly. It's in beta, as you know. And, Google Plus and Facebook have a tit-for-tat competition, so that's always going to be very, very busy, and it's always going to change. So your extension may work one day, and the next day it may break, and then you have like hundreds of users sending you tons of posts, and they're like, wake up, get out of bed, and fix this thing because we're totally addicted to your extension. So, but But it's stressful, but it's also fun for people to see that people really like your work. So, and finally, the biggest headache for extension developers is the fact that Google Plus uses closure compiler and templates that basically change the CSS class names, almost all the CSS class names. And but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about how to get started on Chrome extensions since Adam covered this so nicely. But I can point out a few Chrome extensions that are specifically targeted to Google+, and that's the best way to get started. That's how I get started. I looked at other people's code, and so you have open source extensions, mine's included, and Mohammed wrote like 12 extensions already, so you can look at what he's done, and then I listed a few more extensions that do very radical things with the network and Ajax and other things as well. Chrome Developer Tools, Adam mentioned that as well. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but I was surprised the other day when another extension developer told me they didn't use the debugger. I found that really weird. I remember when I didn't used to use the debugger, but no, you got to use the debugger for two reasons. One, you got to quickly find the bugs in your extension, but also to find out what Google Plus is doing. You got to do some investigation, and you need the debugger. You need to stop the execution of the script to see how the DOM changes. So definitely you have to learn how to do that. Yeah, get the latest Chrome because it will have the latest dev tools, and you actually have 4 different channels of Chrome that you can get. You can get the stable release, you can get the beta? Yeah, beta and dev, and then there's also a canary version, which is even like more cutting edge, I haven't even touched it. I thought dev was enough because I'm already 2 versions ahead of what everybody else has. Well, everybody's on version 13 or 14. When everybody's on version 13, I'm on version 15. I didn't want to go too far and test something that other people don't have. And I've actually run into problems that way, where I released a new feature and people say it doesn't work on their Chrome because they're on Chrome 11 or something like that. So Canary is even more cutting edge. DOM injection. So when you're dealing with Google+, the thing that's interesting about Google+ is that it's not a static page, right? It's not a web page with information. It actually constantly changes. So when it constantly changes and you got new posts, for example, how do you adapt to that, right? So there's basically 2 methods. For example, if you go in here and you look at my post, like here, all of the posts collapsed into a summary. But what happens when a new post comes in at the top? Or what happens when a user clicks on more, right? You have to be able to handle that situation. There are basically 2 different models for that. The first model is, most extension developers do that, is every few seconds they check. Oh, well, is there a new post? Did I put my elements in there? If not, then I'll go ahead and do that. And then the other model is much more difficult, but it's got some advantages, and it's to react to events. And that's the approach that I've taken. And that's when a new post comes in, I can inject immediately. So you won't get a flash. If a new post comes in here, it will come in collapsed. It won't get like expanded and then you'll see it collapse, which is annoying to users. And you won't waste any CPU cycles checking for things that you know have already been done, right? But this is a little bit more complex, so you really have to get into how does Google Plus update its page with Ajax, right? And you have to know all the different ways that data can come in. Okay, and after digging through all this stuff, I think I got a pretty good handle. I may be missing some scenarios, but a pretty good handle of how the posts and the comments and the data is coming in. So when you first load the page, you basically get the HTML. Okay, and that's not always the case. But if I reload here, the first 20 posts will already be there. But let's say if I go on games, for example, if I click on games, you see loading right here. I'm sorry, that's not the right thing. That's navigating. But if I reload here, you see loading there. Okay, you saw the loading. It's actually updating the page using JavaScript, but it's quite different from when you're first loading this stream. Because if I click here, if I reload, the posts are already there. Okay, so that's 2 different ways that you can see that data is coming in. Other things that are kind of weird is that some posts are live Hangouts, and when you have Hangouts, they don't come in. They come in like a few hundred milliseconds later because Google Plus prefers to update it with all the participants, and it's constantly changing. People coming in, people coming out. And the date also doesn't come in right away, which is kind of interesting. So if I had to copy that into my bar right here, I had to do some work. Probably because it has to be localized to the time zone. And then there's menus that come in a little bit later. Navigation is also another way. I mean, for speed, for performance, when you click on here and you click on another page, you don't reload the whole Chrome of the web page. You only reload the content. And so Google Plus uses the latest techniques and really optimized it, but it makes your life a lot more difficult if you're trying to get all the different posts come in, right? And there's different behavior if I click on the same page that I'm on right now. If I click on home and I click it on it again, okay, you'll see a little bit of a flash as I'm reconstructing. Okay, you need to handle that case. If the user is clicking more, right here, clicking more, you need to handle that case. If new posts are coming in. Now, once you get an idea of how Google Plus updates its page, okay, you'll have to start looking at what's going on in the DOM. So right now, I opened the DevTools. DevTools, I don't know what you call this. Developer tools, and here's where the DOM is. And when I first look at this, I mean, this page is massive. There's a lot of code in there. And when I first got in here, I didn't know what was what. But once you get in closer and you spend a little bit more time, things start to make sense. And even though there's a lot of things that don't make any sense, like what is CYDV? I don't know what that means, right? But after a while, you see that there are some things that are in English, content pane. And those are actually the interesting parts, right? Because when the user navigates to another page, what you'll see is that this is the parts that will disappear. Another part will be, another element will be inserted. It will be constructed. The other part will be hidden. The other one will be shown. It will switch, and then it will destroy. And you can see this dance once you start putting some breakpoints in the debugger, and then you can see how the DOM is changing when the Google Plus updates as a result of navigation. It's quite interesting. And then once you develop your own web app, you'll be able to do the same thing. So once you've identified some of these key elements, like content pane, for example, this is where you can put some event handlers and try to see in your script to try to catch those events. Okay, and you have to be aggressive in the filtering because sometimes you could get just too many events. It's going to slow down your page. All right, now here's the biggest problem that we had. Let me show you again. These CYDV, all these class names, initially we're like, okay, well, this doesn't quite make sense. But if we can figure out by going into the page here and right-clicking here, and I click on Inspect Element, it will find out what the matching HTML is. I can say, okay, well, then this one is probably EE stands for the name or something like that, right? So you can start to develop code that says, okay, when this changes or insert an element after that one. The problem is like after a couple weeks after we started coding this stuff, all of them changed. So all of these VE, JN, JR, CJB, all these class names changed. And they've been changing every couple of days or every couple of weeks, depends on how often Google decides to recompile their templates. So this was hell because all extensions broke all at the same time, and all the users went crazy. So we don't have a complete solution for that yet, but we have a couple of mitigation techniques. The first one is instead of using CSS class names, think about the DOM structure. There's some parts where that won't change. For example, like you see, this is a post right here. This is the entire post. It has an ID, update. -Z, you know that's probably not likely to change. So you know that you can start from there and navigate and walk through the DOM and say, okay, well, if I'm 2 levels deep, the second span or whatever, that's going to be the title or whatever. The problem with that is that it's not always possible to craft a good selector that will always work. It's a little bit slower than CSS class names, and your style sheets. I mean, I don't know. We don't have a solution for how you're going to do that in style sheets. Okay, there's another solution that Justin Orman came up with, which is to look whenever Google Plus changes all its CSS class names, to look at the style sheets and try to match them up to see the old ones, the old CSS class names, and the new ones, and see how they match up, and basically then have the library that uses that acts as an abstraction layer that would that you would refer to, so that it would work for the next set of CSS names. But the problem with that is that you have to respond, you have to react. It doesn't automatically fix it. Okay. This is an SDK and library that I'm working on right now that's trying to solve this problem once and for all. But it's I've been working it for quite a long time, for like over a month. Still not out yet. And that allows you to centralize the complexity of these DOM structure rules, and you can write rules that are based on the DOM structure or the style sheets. It allows you to keep using the fast CSS class names, just like Google Plus uses. But if it breaks, it will self-heal by analyzing using the rules and come up with a new set of CSS class names, and the user shouldn't notice. Okay, and it's the benefit of that. And as a fallback, you can download from the internet. So this should possibly solve this once and for all. And while I'm at it, I'm actually going to be I'm doing the hardest part here. So I might as well just create a complete API from this. So that's the next phase after this, is just to write an API that's going to kind of compete with the Google Plus API. Because ultimately, the stuff that you can do by looking at the DOM or looking at the AJAX and the network, the Google Plus API is never going to let you do. I mean, Google Plus API is not going to let you just completely reconstruct the UI, right? And so you're going to have to, some things you're going to have to do yourself. And we don't want to wait. I mean, some of us hackers, we just don't want to wait. Here are some warnings. I'm going to go pretty quickly through this. When you're dealing with mutation events, when you're trying to listen to what changes in the DOM, you have to be careful because those events can really slow down performance. Okay. Another problem is, as Adam mentioned, different extensions that run on one page normally don't interact. But there can be a lot of problems because they can't interact through the DOM. And when when an extension doesn't expect the other, they step on each other's toes. And we have something, sometimes the whole page can freeze. It's actually quite a lot of work to make sure that your extension works with other people's extensions. And users love to blame one or the other. And typically, they blame the last extension that they installed. So you got to make sure you're popular first, right? You got to make sure you're installed first, and then everybody else gets blamed. Because what happens is you get performance problems when the two interact, and it's really nobody's fault. The Chrome Web Store. So when you're uploading to the Chrome Web Store, you got to be careful because when you're requesting permissions, there are a couple consequences. The tabs permission is quite useful. It's very useful, but for some reason, it's linked to the ability to track browsing history. And when users see that, there's like, why does this extension need to see my browsing history? And they get scared. So you really have to really communicate well to your users and say, I'm not going to do this. This is an open source project. I'm a nice guy, right? One thing I did is I released a separate version of my extension so that doesn't use that. It has less functionality, but at least they can be sure that it's not going to have any problems. And also, when you update your extensions and you add permissions, it will disable the extension, and they have to re-enable it, which is a pain. So you got to think ahead about what permissions you're going to need. And then I put a couple more bugs, but that's not too important. Adam talked about the Closure Compiler, which I love. Closure Compiler typically makes your code smaller, but I just use it as also for syntax checking. Well, actually, I primarily use it for type checking. Okay, I actually use JavaScript lint, which is a lot faster. It's like instantaneous for syntax checking. So I actually run both. What I do is I just run a command that just does JavaScript lint and then starts the Closure Compiler. And while that's running in the background, I'm just started to test in Chrome. And then I come back to my page. I see, oh, wait a minute, there's a bunch of other problems with my types. And type checking is, you got to have type checking if your code starts to get really big, which is what happened to me. And then I started to miss Java, right? I love JavaScript, but I started to miss Java because of all the types. So Closure Compiler kind of gives you the best of both worlds. And then I have a list of resources for people who want to check that out later. Any questions? Yeah. Oh, yeah?
I use the API, the Google Plus API, for analytics purposes. So basically, we just extract the information, and it's really annoying that we cannot get information from activities that are not public. So especially when you have the right to get authentication methods. So it will be good if we can get lists. For example, we normally use to get statistics about comments, which is the most popular post for that particular user. And it will be good if you can get from circles as well. I don't know if it's understandable.
Yeah, so instead of just getting statistics from one user, you want to get from an entire circle.
It's from that user, but you know that when you post the activities, you can post it as public or as for a limited circle, let's say, I don't know, for friends or following. And then when you want to get information, normally at the beginning I was posting only to my friends and to my circles. And then we started playing with the Google Plus API to get information about the number of comments and drive statistics of which ones are working better, more social engaged.
Yeah.
And we cannot get anything from the ones that are limited posted, just from the public ones. And you can get it even if you are not authenticated or using the authentication method. So I think it will be really good if you can get list of activities that are not only public, if you provide the permission.
Yeah, and that's going to come, of course, we just got to be a little more patient about that, right? But, the nice thing is you can, get some of that information if you install your own extension and convince some users to install.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, great.